Okay. You broke out with a grin. You broke out into a grin and scooched back as far as you could, making space for Cove to crawl in. He was very tall, so it wasn't a great fit for him, but he managed to squeeze himself in. You understood how that felt, and with the two of you in the loft together, there was barely any room to move. Aww. You lay down next to each other on your sides, face to face. He got under the blanket a bit. One of his arms was nestled under his bed for comfort. The other had nowhere to go and was rested alongside his chest on the floor of the loft. Cove spoke to you softly. So, what am I doing here? I don't know. I thought we could hang out. You can sleep here instead of the floor. I don't know if I would necessarily ask him to sleep in the same bed as me, but I would say we could hang out. I thought we could hang out. Cove's eyebrows dipped. He probably thought you had something more important than that going on. I'm not sure about this. Cove swallowed loudly, and you noticed he wouldn't look you in the eyes anymore. You were feeling the nervousness too. You felt comfortable being so close to him. His reaction made you happy. You felt comfortable being so close to him. It seemed natural to have him near you, and being close like this only made it better. You thought back to earlier in the evening when you and Cove had been talking alone in the sofa. He had definitely been flirting then, and now you were here. You lay there silently. You tried to ease things into conversation. You nudged closer to him. You touched his free arm lightly. He's clearly, been uncomfortable this whole time, so I'm not gonna push anything. I'm gonna ease things with conversation. So it's been a really nice night, huh? Oh yeah, I guess it has. Don't you think the loft is more comfortable than it looks?
It's nice.
It's not bad. Would be nice to have more room. I agree. Cove smiled at you through the dim light, and you knew he was only joking. The two of you continued to whisper for a while, becoming more relaxed. You went to sleep how you were. You snuggled up against him. You leaned in to kiss him. He would freak out. Nah, I don't wanna do that to the poor boy. Reading him up to this point, I wouldn't put him in that position. So I went to sleep how you were. You didn't do anything, simply letting out a long breath and getting ready to settle in for the night right next to him. You let your eyes close, and then you could feel Cove rest his head against you in the dark. After that, you were soon asleep. When you woke up the next morning, it was to the rumble of the RV as it traveled the long journey home. You noticed quickly that you weren't as warm as you had been during the night, and when you checked next to you, Cove was gone. Blinking sleepily, you peeked over the edge of the loft to find out where he had gone. Maybe he had snuck back to his spot on the floor during the night. However, you soon noticed him sitting on the couch, talking quietly with his mom. His head hung in embarrassment. Your movement gave you away, and Kyra suddenly looked up and caught your eye. She simply smiled amusedly at you, and it was obvious what happened. Cove hadn't gotten away with it. They found him there in the loft, and then you woke up while he was trying to explain. You knew it was going to be a long, long time before you lived this one down, if you ever did. We didn't do anything. And we were in the same room as everybody else. We did nothing. We just hung out. Soon your moms and Elizabeth emerged from the room, dressed and ready for the day of travel. You spent most of the day hanging out together in the RV, savoring the last few hours of vacation. Kyra suggested a few different travel games she used to play with Cove when she was younger, and you all had a great time competing against each other. A little later in the day, you tried to talk to Cove about what happened in the loft, but he simply apologized and changed the subject. It was a bit too much for him to try speaking on, especially right now. You understood. See, this is why I'm glad I didn't make any moves. So, I feel like I did the right thing. For his comfort level, at least. When the RV finally pulled into your street, it was well into the night, and you were looking forward to crawling into your own bed after the last few days away. Everyone must have been feeling the same, because it was mutually agreed that unpacking and cleaning the RV would wait until morning. Once home again, you went straight up to your room and dropped onto your bed, shoes and all. You were happy to be in your own bed. Yeah, it felt weird to be alone. It felt good to be alone. You wish you were still on the trip. You missed being near Cove. I'm gonna say I'm happy to be in my own bed. You stretched out Wallace with a smile on your face, enjoying having the space all to yourself. With those last few thoughts drifting through your mind, it wasn't long before you dozed off to sleep. Tomorrow, life would go on like normal. That was okay. I feel like that was compared to the other moments that I played in this um in this stage so far, that was probably one of my lesser favorites. It wasn't bad. Like, I liked all the developments obviously going on with Cove, but I don't know, like, I felt like the soiree was a lot more fun, and the birthday one was more fun. I don't know, I just felt like things were a lot more fun in some of the other ones. So, but it was still fine.
We have 2 left, so let's go with growing. Early one afternoon, you found yourself in the living room with your family. It was another one of those summer days where it felt too hot to go to outside, but it was too uncomfortable to do anything inside either. The air conditioner was cranked up as far as you could negotiate it, but everyone was still being pretty lazy. You, your moms, and sister were lounging around while the TV blared on in the backdrop, ignored by all of you. You specifically were lying spread eagle on the carpet, sitting cross-legged on the floor, perched on the arm of the couch, draped over the coffee table. At that age, not spread eagle on the carpet, that's not really my thing. I think sitting cross-legged on the floor, that's kind of how was my default resting position at that age. Nowadays, it's more like perched on the arm of the couch. But you looked out the windows at the backyard, not that there was anything of particular interest to watch. Elizabeth broke the silence with a loud groan. You glanced over. She was lying on her back over the couch, massaging her calf with one hand. Ugh, I feel terrible. I'm dying in this house and my legs hurt. Mom looked up from the magazine she'd barely been flipping through and frowned, concerned. Could you have strained them somehow? Elizabeth flailed briefly and then flopped onto her side with a heavy sigh. I don't know, it just hurts.
Sweetie.
Oh, sweetheart. Ma got up from her seat at the kitchen table and walked over to your sister. She did a light pat on Elizabeth's shoulders sympathetically. I'm sorry you have to deal with that. Maybe it's growing pains? You could be taller by next fall. Elizabeth scoffed. She didn't look impressed by Ma's assessment. I'd rather be my height forever than deal with this. Mom walked over too, leaning against the back of the couch. Kids, they grow up so fast. Soon Elizabeth will have a home of her own, maybe even with a nice husband and some kids, if she feels like it. She sniffled loudly and wiped at her eye, but you could tell it was just a bit. You tilted your head. Even though you knew Elizabeth liked guys, it was hard to imagine her with a boyfriend or husband. She only seemed invested in hanging out with her group of friends, not chasing after boys. Your mom must agree with you because she shook her head.
No.
Let's not exaggerate, she's still practically a child. But if you ever do pursue romance, Elizabeth, you can come talk to me about it. Definitely. We're always willing to lend an ear. Elizabeth's features contorted in disgust.
No.
No way, I'm not talking to my moms about that. Mom's jaw dropped, and she gasped in an exaggerated display of shock. Her hand came up to rest against her chest. Ma only grinned. She didn't look offended by Elizabeth's quick response at all. It really wouldn't be so bad to come to us. I know what it's like to have a crush on a pretty boy or two. I don't, but I can listen anyway. Oh, so it looks like Mom might be bisexual, and Mom is probably full lesbian. Full lesbian? I don't know if that's even the best way to put that, but it doesn't sound right now that I think about it, but... Mom snorted at her own joke, while Ma burst into giggles. They were having a little too much fun at Elizabeth's expense. Elizabeth certainly wasn't feeling the amusement because she rolled her eyes and sat up.
Thanks.
I'm going back to my room. I'd rather melt alone. Thanks. She strode off towards the staircase, taking the steps 2 at a time. Your mom stared after her, then turned to each other with raised eyebrows. Whoops, looks like we scared her off with all that romance talk.
Well?
Oh well, we'll get her next time. You watched them titter with some surprise. Obviously your moms liked women, but you had no idea that Ma liked guys too. Today was the first time you'd heard her say something like that. Ma, I always thought you only liked ladies. You like guys too? Ma turned to you, happy to bring you into things now that you've spoken up. She smiled and nodded. That's right, I like both. But I like your mom most out of everyone. She's special. Ma's smile turned all soft in the corners, like it usually did when she looked at her. She pinched Mom's cheeks lightly. Mom reached up to cup a hand over Ma's. Even when Ma stopped pulling her cheek, their hands remained clasped together.
You're fantastic.
Thanks, Lanny. I think most women have charm, but no one can hold a candle to you.
Aww.
Oh, Pamela. Ma beamed, then kissed Mom on the cheek she'd been pinching before. I don't remember if they had told us the names of the moms before this. Pamela, and what was the other one? Lonnie?
Aw.
I don't know if that's short for Melanie or anything like that. You laughed at their antics. You thought the moment was very sweet. You cringed. Parents were embarrassing. I think at that age I would have been less about. I would have not thought it was like a sweet moment, but I would probably laughed at their antics. You chuckled quietly at their little back and forth. They were always saying cutesy stuff like that to each other. Ma looked back at you, letting Mom's hand go with a brief squeeze. She settled down next to you, and Mom followed soon after. You know, I'm also here to listen to you whenever you're ready. That offer isn't just for Elizabeth. In fact, I think that talk might be needed sooner for you. After all, you already have someone, isn't that right? Mom shook her head and elbowed Ma, but it was futile. Nedler. You blushed fiercely. You also elbowed her. Ma, I don't have someone. Yeah, that's true. I would blush fiercely. Ma only giggled and smiled, not looking at the least bit apologetic. See, it's hard for me to, really figure out what I would do in the situation, because growing up as a kid, I knew my parents would not be comfortable with, at that age, definitely not comfortable with me liking another boy. So, because I was just, realistically, I would have been so on edge about talking romantically with my parents that really none of these things apply, and I just don't know for sure how I would have actually responded to this if I knew that my parents were open to me liking boys. There's no rush, of course. You can take all the time you need to figure out what or who or what.
It's okay.
Don't think you have to stick with whatever you come up with right now either. Life's nice like that. It can change and you can learn. Mom nodded her agreement. The two of us are happy to hear you out, and we may be able to relate better than you think. Still, we won't push the topic most of the time. She gave Ma the weakest scathing look possible while being unable to stop grinning. Thanks, you nodded silently. You shrugged. You don't have to worry about it. I'd rather pass on that. I'll probably, either nod silently or thanks. I mean, I think if they were that open to it, I would say thanks. I'll think about it.
Wonderful.
Good, that's all we asked for. Mom let out another exaggerated sniffle. It didn't take a genius to realize it was fake. First Elizabeth and now you, Vaughn? Do you have to grow up? Yes, children tend to do that from time to time. Your parents quickly grew absorbed in their conversation about rearing kids. You took that as your cue to leave, getting up so you could spend some time alone in your room, too. They let you go without a problem, so you made your way up the stairs. You let out a sigh once you stepped into your room. It was just as sweltering in there as it was in the living room, possibly even a little warmer. You couldn't even open your windows, since it was hotter outside, and you'd just let the AC out. You dragged your feet as you crossed the room. You checked your current sweltering condition in the mirror as you passed by it. You thought back to the conversation you'd had downstairs about growing up and all that. After a moment, you stepped a bit closer to the mirror. You stared into it, then turned away from the surface to look down at yourself. You were definitely growing, all right. It was weird thinking about how you were now in comparison to what you'd been when you were younger. When it came to your body, it was getting some muscle definition nowadays. Psh, no. Definitely not. Was chubby. No, I was really skinny. I was a beanpole. Was slender, was heavy set, was sort of scrawny. I mean, it's between slender or scrawny. I don't know if I was scrawny necessarily. I'm gonna say slender. Was slender. You shifted to one to the side, your head still facing forward and continuing the self-evaluation from this viewpoint. At birth, you were assigned female. At birth, you were assigned male. You were born intersex, and this is really cool. I love how inclusive this is. At birth, you were assigned male, and your chest was only flat. Your chest was flat, but thought about it being different. Your chest was flat by birth, but you aimed to have breasts through hormone therapy. No, your chest is only flat. And that's just the way it was for you. You took a step backwards, finished with your impromptu inspection. You locked eyes with your reflection, cocking your head to the side. All things considered, you thought you looked fantastic. Nah, I wasn't that secure with my body. You didn't look too bad. You had no idea how to feel. You were simply neutral. You were self-conscious. You just wanted to look different than you did. I would say I'm self-conscious. Yeah, you were self-conscious. It took you a moment to realize that you were frowning at yourself. You glanced away from the mirror. You shook your head roughly, putting thoughts that you were turning into out of your mind. This wasn't the time to focus on such things. You had to find something to do in this heat. You shuffled over to your bed, collapsing onto the mattress, your brow scrunched up in thought. Time passed slowly, and to your annoyance, possible ideas about what to do were few and far between. You weren't sure how long it had been, but eventually you heard your mom call you from downstairs. Vaughn, there's a call for you. Cove wants to come over. Is that all right? You perked up at the word, sitting up in bed. You yelled back to her immediately. Yeah! You got to your feet and headed downstairs, eager to see your friend. You needed to go downstairs soon anyway, because your empty stomach told you it was almost time for lunch. Just as you reached the bottom of the stairs, you saw Mom put the phone back on the receiver. She glanced at Ma, leaning her hip against the kitchen counter.
Pickle.
Well, here comes trouble. We better pace ourselves. Ma clicked her tongue in clear disapproval of Mom's words. He's such a good boy. Cove never wants to cause trouble. He can just be a bit thoughtless and impulsive. Oh, I know, he's very sweet, but that's what makes it more of a problem. If a stranger, some kid from school was egging Vaughn on to behave badly, I think we can both agree that he'd do the right thing in the end. But if Cove Holden got into a reckless mood and wanted Vaughn to be a part of the ride, can we really be certain of what call he'd make then?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Vaughn helps Cove settle down. He could have gotten himself in even more trouble without it.
Thanks.
You have a point. Ma just laughed. As she turned away, still snorting, her eyes met yours. She blinked in surprise, then waved at you with an easy grin. Mom looked over, noticing you at the foot of the stairs as well. Oh, I didn't expect you to come down already, Vaughn. I just wanted to let you know what was happening. You pretended you didn't overhear the conversation. You called Mom out on her comment. No, I'm just gonna pretend. Yeah, it's okay, I just got here. I wasn't one to call my parents out or anything, not at that age especially. From the way Mom and Ma exchanged amused glances, you got the feeling that they didn't believe you. Thankfully, they didn't correctly accuse you of lying. Sure. Well, we'll just get out of the way. You and Cove take care. You couldn't help but flush when Ma winked. Mom elbowed her, even as a smile tugged at her lips. Honestly, this lady. Your moms whispered amongst themselves as they went down the hall. Eventually, you heard the faint sound of their bedroom door shutting. Now you're alone in the living room, tasked with waiting for Cove. It was just fine with you. If it hadn't been so hot outside, you would have visited him at his house a long time ago. You took a seat at the kitchen counter and settled in for the wait. As expected, there was a knock on the door a few minutes later. When you got up and answered it, your neighbor was standing on the other side. He came in once you stepped aside to let him pass, giving a little wave. You greeted him as you typically did. With a wave, with a low five, with a nudge to the shoulder, with a nookie, with a hug. He stiffened your arms, then relaxed seconds later. One would think he'd be used to your hugs after all these years. Hey. His voice was cracked as he struggled to say something. You didn't feel worried about that. It was how he usually reacted when you were close by. Cove sighed and wiped at his face a bit. You noted the sheen of sweat across his brow. He must be glad to be back in an air-conditioned place, even if he'd only had to walk across the street to get there. Is something going on? Why'd you want to come over? I don't want to do anything, not when it's like this. He gestured vaguely at the humid air hanging around. I thought I could at least do nothing with you. You thought it was really sweet. How'd you know I was doing nothing? Maybe I had plans. You nodded. That made sense to you. I was thinking the exact same thing. You thought that was really sweet. His words were nice and expressed real fondness for you, in a strange sort of way, which was usually the case with Cove. Have you had lunch yet? I was gonna do it soon. He shook his head.
Not really.
I hadn't really felt like eating because of the heat. I probably should have lunch. I didn't have breakfast this morning. Yeah, I get like that sometimes too. You should really eat properly. You didn't eat at all? Then you gotta have something now. Great, we can have lunch together. Yeah, great. I'm gonna say, you didn't eat at all? Then you gotta have something now. You urged Cove in the direction of the kitchen. He stumbled after you. Okay. As one, you head into the kitchen. You crossed your arms as you glanced around, wondering what you should scrounge up for a meal. I don't want to eat anything that's warmed up. Is there something cold or not cooked? Yeah? After a bit of back and forth, the two of you concluded that you should raid the fridge and cabinet in order to make the sandwiches. With that settled, you had planned to decide on the outside layers first. There was a wide variety to choose from, since everyone in your house had their own favorites. This is definitely not in character for me, because I was not... Still am not. I'm not a sandwich person. I don't know. I always found sandwiches to be kind of boring. Don't get me wrong. Like, if you love sandwiches, if that's your go-to, then, you know, more power to you. But, yeah, growing up as a kid, sandwiches, not really my thing. I wanted some hot food. Basically, I like hot food. I want a hot lunch. So it has to be something that's been fully cooked, I suppose. Which is why I'm good with burgers, which essentially is a sandwich. Good with burgers. Not so much with cold sandwiches. Hot sandwiches are fine. There was white bread, wheat bread, sourdough, mixed grains, gluten-free bread, and pita pockets. I mean, typically if I was at home, there would almost always be some leftover, like, Filipino food. That's my go-to for lunch. Mm-mm-mm. Could you take the grain one for me? Sure. You reached out for the mixed grains. Then made your decision. A lettuce wrap, white bread, sourdough, mixed grains, pita pockets, gluten-free bread, cinnamon swirl bread. Not really for a sandwich. Nowadays, mixed greens. Back in the day, I'd be all over the sourdough. Sourdough's so good. You pulled out the sourdough too, setting both items onto the counter. Then you had to decide what main direction the sandwich would go in. You wanted to make a sweeter style of sandwich. You wanted a truly savory style of sandwich. Yeah, if I'm going to have a sandwich, it's gotta be savory. Something savory would make it feel like a real meal. As for the specific ingredients, ham slices, turkey slices, interesting. I've never had tofu in a sandwich before, but I can definitely see that working. Hummus, egg salad, lettuce, tomatoes, cucumber, avocado, peppers, pickles, cheddar cheese, pepper jack, mozzarella. Ham, peppers, cheddar cheese, mozzarella, sure, maybe some avocado, lettuce, tomatoes, hummus, red onions. I mean, not cucumber. I'm not a big fan of cucumber. I do like pickles, but not necessarily on my sandwich. It depends. Sometimes I like pickles in my sandwiches, especially if it's like a chicken sandwich, just to help cut through the heaviness of the fried chicken. But normally I would just prefer having pickles on its own. Tofu would be nice too, but I've never actually done it on a sandwich before, so this wouldn't be accurate if I picked it. And then you moved on to condiments. For the finishing touch, you intended to top your sandwich with mustard, mayonnaise, pesto, hot sauce, salt and pepper, ranch. Hot sauce, ranch, not so much mustard or mayonnaise. pesto. I think that was everything. Realistically, we would not be having pesto in our fridge, realistically. You nodded to yourself with a quiet hum, satisfied. The two of you bustled around the kitchen, opening and closing things in order to collect everything you needed for your individual sandwiches. You focused intently on assembling your own, for the most part. When you were close to being done, though, you glanced over at your neighbor. Cove was putting a sandwich together delicately, his brow furrowed, and tongue sticking out just barely. There were open jars for peanut butter and honey near his plate, as well as a banana peel. Ooh, peanut butter, honey, and banana? All you need is a few slices of bacon. That would be an amazing sandwich. Peanut butter, honey, banana, and bacon. Elvis was a huge fan. I just literally came back from Memphis for our 4th of July vacation. We have family in Memphis, and I got to go. One of the places we went to go is Sun Studio, which is where Elvis got his big break recording an official studio for the first time. So how about that as a fun fact? So he was making peanut butter, banana, and honey sandwich on mixed grain bread. That sounded great. Maybe you'd have one yourself at a different time. Curiosity satiated, you turned back to your plate and finished your own creation. By the time you were done, Cove had already cleaned up his workstation. He turned to face you, studying your sandwich briefly. He gave an incredulous look, but didn't question you about it. Good. Done? Yeah. Cool. He waited as you quickly returned the ingredients and cleaned a few utensils, then the two of you collected your respective plates. You both agreed on heading upstairs to hang out in your room. You and Cove entered your bedroom while balancing your food on the plates. Nothing fell, so it was a successful trip. Yeah, for me that would be a successful trip. Cove took a seat on the ground, stretching out on the hardwood floor in an attempt to keep a bit cooler. He immediately took a big bite of his sandwich, chewed, and then hummed happily. This sandwich is really good. At least that's something. At this point, you'd sat down and started your own sandwich. You nodded. You were enjoying yours too. Obviously, you were a pro at making sandwiches. He leaned back on his hands while chewing and glanced around. His every movement was sluggish. Want to do something? It seemed the plan of not doing anything at all had already worn thin, despite his lack of enthusiasm. Yeah, like what? Maybe. Not really. You couldn't even muster a reply. Yeah, let's do something else other than doing nothing. He rolled his head back, looking up at the ceiling. What about Hangman? You laughed at the suggestion but went along with it. Yeah, neither of you had much energy for something more taxing. You grudgingly humored it. You thought it was a nice idea. Sure, why not? Sure, why not? You put your plate on the side and pulled out some markers and scrap paper. As you laid everything on the floor, he scooted back to make more room in front of you. Cove picked up one of the markers with his right hand while keeping a half slice of sandwich in his left. Can I pick the phrase? Go ahead, I don't mind. He smiled briefly before he bent over the paper and began sketching the hangman frame. Then he stopped, pursing his lips in thought. He tapped at the end of his marker against his cheek. You watched silently as Cove looked down at the paper up at your face and then off to the side of the loop. His marker kept tapping his cheek the entire time. I enjoyed playing Hangman back in the day, but when you're a kid, you don't really think about how dark that game actually is, the theme around the game. It's basically Wheel of Fortune, but not with the whole premise that if you don't solve in time, then a man basically is hung, which is very dark. You raised an eyebrow. He'd suggested the game and wanted to pick the phrase, but Lucky didn't actually have anything in mind for it. Finally, he put empty lines on the paper to signify spots for letters. Alright, you can start guessing. You peered over. His secret phrase consisted of 3 words. The first had 3 letters, and the last had 4. I almost wanted to say that it was going to spell I love you, but that's not the way that the letters are formed properly. You had thought hard about what your first guess would be. Enter one letter of the alphabet.